This is Sleeve Notes, one album, 10 questions. On this episode, Tame Impala.
Kevin Parker, there is a lot of love for this record, Lonerism. And the first time I heard tracks on that record, I got sent a sampler. And there were about 5 or 6 songs on it, and Apocalypse Dreams was on it, Elephant was on it, Be Above It was on it.
Oh, okay.
And I just remember listening to those 5 songs, and it was a light bulb moment where it was like, wow, okay, this band have really stepped it up.
Cool.
It came out in 2012, and actually I listened to it on the way into work today in full, and I think it's aging. Yeah, it's aging so beautifully.
Okay.
It really is.
That's good to say that.
So let's get started. Over the next hour, you're going to hear Lonerism in full on Beats1. So I've got 10 questions here.
Yeah, sure.
And these 10 questions are designed to get to the heart of an important record.
Okay.
And today, that important record is Lonerism.
Awesome.
So question 1, Kevin Parker, when was the last time you listened to Lonerism?
This morning.
Really?
Yeah. It was,
serious?
Well, I was getting ready for this interview, obviously.
No, I love that. What did you think?
A roller coaster of emotions, obviously. But I love that it's like for me, it's just this like crystal clear snapshot of my life then. Because in the way that making music is kind of like looking at yourself in the mirror, listening to music you made a long time ago is like looking at an old picture of yourself.
Wow.
You know, it's like a little bit cringe, a little bit like, oh, what was I thinking? But also a little like, bang, that was me, you know?
Did you have that at the time? Those moments where maybe you might cough over a moment that you feel is a bit embarrassing. At the time, when you've just finished something and you are 1,000% indebted to it and you know every single sort of nook and cranny, do you have that scared quality of it then as well? Or does that come out with age, do you think?
That comes out in the wash, yeah.
Does it?
Yeah, any kind of like insecurities about it. Because it's like, the older it gets, the imperfections, all that kind of stuff, they just add to the charm.
Question 2, who were you when you made that record?
Sounds very cliche, but I was a wide-eyed, curious, a little bit scared of the world that I had just been introduced to. However, I did have this newfound confidence that I didn't have a trace of before. This new kind of freedom to sing about things that I always felt too shy to sing about.
When we did the interview, I interviewed you for NME about it, just as it came out. And I read the transcript back, actually, in prep for this.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
And you're incredibly open.
That I would probably cringe at a little bit.
No, it made a lot of sense, actually. You were really, really open. And you were kind of saying that you were, when you played a song like Why Won't They Talk to Me, there's a quote from you saying, I felt weird playing it to the others. Because it's so open. And I didn't realise how open it was until I played it to them. And they were kind of like, wow, that's quite deep and personal.
Yeah.
And that's the first time you've done that, isn't it?
Yeah, because, you know, music has always been therapeutic to me, but never that therapeutic, you know, that never like that sort of bearing all, you know, like until then I was living in a share house with the guys. Any music we made was kind of like, you know, it was the music was a lot more kind of communal feeling in that we could all listen to it together and be like, yeah, this is cool. Rather than like, oh, this like, you know, this makes...
The other thing that struck me about that transcript is that there are bits of it where you're saying how fun and amazing it was to record. And then from later interviews that I read, at some point you kind of turn and you say, actually, it was quite an agonising couple of years of my life.
I think that that corresponds to like the first half and the second half of recording it.
Because it was a 2-year process, right, pretty much?
Yeah. I mean, again, like, I'm always recording, so it was a 2-year process. That's just because like it had been 2 years since Inner Speaker came out.
And where were you living in those 2 years when you were off tour?
I was living at home in Perth for the first half, and then I moved to Paris at the end.
Paris plays quite a large role in the record.
It does. I mean, only because that's where I was physically, and the picture I took was in Paris.
How did you take that picture? That's actually you shot that, right?
Yeah. It's on this old film. Well, not old. It's like one of those plastic film, like Lomo. Is that what it is? Lomo?
Yeah,
Lomography.
Yeah.
Which I just got and I was kind of obsessed with. I'd like just ride around Paris, like take pictures of things, you know. But I did know that I wanted the cover to be a picture of like a beautiful park with everyone in there and like having fun and being social, but from the other side of the bars, you know? Like that was kind of this idea. I didn't know if it was going to work, but
It did work. I think it's one of the iconic album shots of the decade, actually.
oh, thanks, man.
Question 3. What did you want to achieve?
I wanted to make something really kind of a lot more kind of powerfully psychedelic. I'd gotten into the Flaming Lips, and they had that kind of just like explosive, ecstatic, emotional, melancholic music that I kind of fell in love with. I had always loved Supertramp, like that kind of like stadium pop. Like I loved the idea of making a stadium pop thing, and I finally felt confident and able enough to do it.
Were you still learning when you were making that record?
Yeah, absolutely, and you can hear it too. But it was just
Meaning
like,
what? Give me an example of where you can hear something that maybe if you were doing things completely by the book, you wouldn't have done.
well, I mean, actually, like it feels like We're Gonna Go Backwards was almost unusable as a mix because I had plugged the mic in to like, you know, like laptops used to have like an auxiliary in, like
Yeah,
iPod.
yeah.
When you plug an iPod in, I plugged a microphone straight into it, and it made this kind of out of phase thing. And so the vocals were always almost mixed out of phase. We're getting really technical here. And so if you listen to stuff that's out of phase, like stereo out of phase, it'll sound fine in your headphones, but if you play it off your iPhone, which sums to mono, it'll be dead silent. So we were mixing it, and we were like, the vocals sound kind of weird. Keep going. And so we almost finished the mix, Feels Like We're Gonna Go Backwards, not knowing that if you played an iPhone, it would have been instrumental. An instrumental.
No, imagine that.
Yeah,
that would have changed everything.
It would have been an actual disaster. It would have been, especially because that was like the lead single.
So we're here with Kevin Parker going through sleeve notes. 10 questions, 1 album. This is Tame Impala on Lonerism. Question 4. What are your clearest memories of the time when you were making the album?
I was living in a house in Perth. I moved in there with Cam, actually, who ended up joining the band. But he was never there. He was kind of off doing his own thing. And so I set up my studio. I had a dedicated room to being a recording studio, which I didn't have at our old share house. That was just like the corner of my bedrooms. Finally had a studio, you know, I could have all my stuff all set up.
There's that amazing press picture of you lying in the floor.
Yeah.
Just remembered it, surrounded by
Yeah.
so much gear. And it just looks like a music creator's paradise. You know?
Yeah, well, I mean, it was the first time I had a drum kit there. I didn't have to go down to the local pub to record drums where they had mic stands and
Which
microphones.
pub was that?
It was the Norfolk Basement.
Amazing.
That's where I recorded a lot of... I mean, that's where I used to record drums for my recordings.
Yeah.
And it was just this amazing time of just unhinged experimentation and exploration. I mean, I'd record until 5 a.m., I'd go to sleep and wake up and start again. You know, I go to bed at like 5. You know, I'd just be drinking red wine all night and smoking spliffs. And it was just this really, really amazing time, you know. This period of just discovery, I was just discovering. I had found a new kind of guitar sound, which led to me finding a new way of writing chords, and these new chords were like making me write music that was conjuring up emotions that I hadn't felt in a long time. You know, like it reminded me of being a child again, basically.
Question 5. What's your favourite track on Lonerism?
My favourite song, it's kind of like the least, you know, my like unsung hero, is probably Music to Walk Home By.
Yeah.
I mean, for me, that kind of like the centerpiece of the album. It's kind of like the flag. For me, it's the flagship of the album because it sums up the emotion of the album. It really does kind of like, for me anyway, it takes me to where the rest of the album kind of takes me. It's like when I'm listening to that, it's like boom, you know?
Really?
Yeah.
Question 6. What lyric are you most proud of?
If you're asking me like the cleverest line, I think it was he pulled the mirrors off his Cadillac because he doesn't like it looking like he looks back. I mean,
Which is amazing.
It's not the most profound.
No, but it trips off the tongue though. It's so good.
Yeah, I remember being quite proud of myself, quite pleased with myself.
Because Elephant had been around for years, right?
That's right. Yeah, in fact, it had been around since before. The actual riff had been around since before in a speaker.
Did you think it was any good?
I always thought it was fun and cool, but I never thought about putting on a Tame Impala album. It was only when I realised the rest of the album was so kind of emotionally deep and the grooves were a certain way that I was like, hey, you know what? The album needs something like this. It needs like a jaunty kind of upbeat. I knew that my friends had always egged me on to do something with that song.
Really?
I always thought it was a bit kind of shallow, a bit kind of like cringe. But now I kind of appreciate Elephant because the character that I'm singing about, it kind of, but from like the loner's perspective, who is like the character. Let's say the character. Don't think that it's like a concept album about a particular character who is a loner, but it's how I always used to sort of envision big egotistical people, egotistical people that would sort of march around.
The jocks.
So, the jock.
And
It's kind of how a loner might see a jock. Exactly, like Elephant. You know.
Question 7. What do you remember about the day it was released, which is 5th of October 2012?
Wow. Well, put it this way. It was released on different days in different countries. I remember the day it came out in Australia. I had something going on in my life at the moment. It was kind of like, it wasn't like heavy. It was stupid, but it was full on. And I remember I didn't give a shit. The album had just come out.
Really?
Something else is going on. Yeah.
Do you regret that now?
No. In fact, maybe it was kind of a useful distraction from the tension of releasing an album. I mean, I didn't even have a mobile phone back then, so I wasn't like checking, Instagram and like what people thought. So yeah, that's what I remember.
Question 8. What one thing would you change about Lonerism?
That's a dangerous question. Because you know what? It's a dangerous question because I have the power to change it.
I know.
And I mean, like, okay, so
I don't think you should. I don't think you should.
Okay,
can I just say that? I want to assert some authority here.
Thank you. It's good to hear you say it. It's good to be reminded of that. I'd make the vocals louder.
On
Definitely.
every track?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, definitely. Clearer. Even though I was really inspired by singing about things I'd never sung before, by the time it came to mix them, I'd returned to my kind of shy self. I was like, no, bury him. I only want people to be able to understand it when they read the lyrics book.
But then on some tunes, like Keep On Lying, it works how deep your voice is buried in that song in particular.
Right.
Because you kind of have to really dig into it and go like, what's he singing about there?
Right.
And be above it as well.
Yeah, I mean, all of them, especially Music to Walk Home By, because it was the most personal.
What's that other one, that secret lyric about being a star? One day I'll be a star and they'll be sorry.
Yeah.
That was kind of hidden completely.
Another one that I buried completely because although it was 100% accurate, not like because I'm a star now or whatever, just
what you wanted to say, that is what you wanted to say.
Exactly.
That's what you mean, yeah.
Exactly. That emotion of when I was a kid going like,
Yeah.
You'll be sorry when I'm like big and famous. That emotion was pretty clear. However, I buried it.
We're here with Kevin Parker. We're talking about Lonerism, which is a fantastic album, or maybe one of the albums of the decade, in my opinion. We're going through sleeve notes, finding out what makes that record so great. Question 9, Kevin Parker. How did Lonerism change your life?
Where I am now, it looks like Lonerism was kind of just like, oh yeah, they became a slightly bigger indie band. You know, I got recognised at the cafe.
Yeah.
Like maybe a couple more times than I used to. You know. Other than that, I mean, I got some money. I bought a house, you know.
Big deal.
I had enough money to buy a house.
It's a big deal.
Thanks, Elephant. Thanks to all the car companies that put it in their car ad. You know, like these are the things that these are. I mean, and obviously, of course, like the amount of people that it reached. I mean, that's the biggest one, but I don't really see that as affecting my life.
It did. From my point of view, it certainly took you out of indie world and into mainstream world, even if it was just for the singles on that record.
Yeah.
And it set you on a path, I think.
It might also just be because it was such a whirlwind. Like we were just touring constantly.
One album, 10 questions. Sleeve notes.
Final question then, Kevin Parker. If you could dedicate Lonerism to one person, who would it be?
I think just myself when I was that age, when I was like 14. You know, I'd give him a signed copy of the album saying like, don't worry, you got out the other end. You know what I mean? Totally sort of like therapy for that kid that I was, you know. I just started to become a teenager, you know, and like I didn't have the most solid family life, you know, like there wasn't like I didn't have a solid base to kind of fall back on there. So I was tackling a lot of things on my own. and I was just lost. You know, I just remember thinking like, I've got no one. You know what I mean? I remember like once when I was like 15 or something, I was brushing my teeth. I just broke down crying. You know, I just felt so alone.
Really?
Yeah. And so this album kind of, I guess it kind of just is the word validates? You know,
Yeah.
it kind of just like it makes that all kind of like it had a purpose. Like I wasn't just you know completely aimless and without hope. And that's the thing about Lonerism. When I listened to it this morning, I was like, it's got this weird hopefulness to it.
It does. It really does. And you can hear that. I think every single person who listens to it can hear that as well.
Sure. I mean, maybe that's the charm of it. Maybe that's why it's done so well.
Kevin Parker, thank you very much.
Thanks, man. Thanks for having me.